Hi, I'm Jeff Hughes. I'm producer of the Happy Buddha comedy series here in the Washington, D.C. area.
Hi, my name's Sabahat Chaudhary, and I'm co-founder of the District Improv Company.
Hi, I'm Shawn Westfall, and for the last 10 years, I've been the exclusive teacher of improvisational comedy downtown at the DC Improv.
And hello, I'm Topher Bellavia, executive producer of The Charlie Viscona Show. Welcome. Please join us in conversation.
I've seen a graduation show that you conduct every month at the DC Improv, and I had sort of said to myself, well, I'd like to try that sometime, but you know, there's a lot of things you say you're going to try, you don't necessarily get around to. But then there was a girl.
Sure de la femme,
there was a girl, and we felt differently about each other. And I liked the way I felt about her, but she didn't like the way that she felt about me. So I was sort of dealing with the reverberations of that not working out. And I said, you know, I was in a rut, and I said, well, I want to try some things I haven't tried. That's that class that I'd seen at that performance I'd seen at DC Improv. I want to try this improv thing. So I signed up for one of your classes.
Do you remember like who you went to see? Was there someone like a friend or something like that?
It was a friend of a friend. Funnily enough, that was actually sort of another girl that invited me. So improv revolves around former girlfriends.
So improv's a dating strategy.
By the way, I've never dated Jeff. I feel like I have to say that.
Well, you know, you may have to hear this. But so, yeah, it was about 2 or 3 years ago that I, actually it was, I can remember the exact day of the first class. It was November 8th, 2010. I went to my first class, and I really enjoyed it. It was, you know, I was nervous about it. And I had never been, a lot of people that do improv, you know, they came out of like drama school or they did a lot of acting in high school and college. I had never done any of that. I'd always been the writer who kind of like stayed off to the side.
You know, it's strange. Most of my classes, the people getting up, the first time they're on stage in my improv class is the first time they've ever been on stage. They have no performance chops or experience whatsoever. So yeah, it's not unusual. So
yeah, and I came to to really enjoy it. I liked the doing it, sort of getting a laugh, you know, from people, interacting with other people. And the longer I've done it, the more I've actually. This really hit me like very recently, like within the last week or so. I've realized how much improv is really like a life and just relationship building, because it's all about listening to the other person, not trying to predetermine things and sort of going with the flow. And it's really, had a profound impact on my life.
Cool. I think it's your turn, Sabahat.
Well, I guess I first started doing improv when a friend of mine from college, I think he actually liked me, which is why he said this.
And we're back.
And he was like, you know, there's this thing in town, improv, and I think you'd really like it. And he took me to a show at the Washington Improv Theater. He took me to one of the ensembles there called Caveat. And I was like totally mesmerized, but I didn't think that was something I would do. And so, and then he started taking classes with you at DC Improv, and I went to his graduation show, and it was so much fun. It was kind of weird because it was at noon in a dark room and on a sunny day when most people would like to be outside or walking their dogs, going for a jog.
To heck with the good weather. Come to the dungeon of the DC Improv.
But I was like, wow, this is awesome. Everyone's having so much fun, and it's like an opportunity to be creative in a way that you would not otherwise be as an adult unless you had a creative career. And this was now in 2008, I think. And then I started taking classes with you. And it was awesome, like sort of the same thing as Jeff. I discovered that it was a really good way of just connecting with people and having the opportunity to get people to laugh at you and or please people, I guess.
And you guys have heard this too, and I think I've probably mentioned this to Topher too. It's you're right, connecting with people and forming those bonds. it's really, really difficult to dislike someone who's making you laugh. And so when you take a class with a bunch of people, and people who are who 6 weeks ago you didn't even know, and they're making you laugh, it's like, this is where it's at. Yeah, so.
And then for the most part, wonderful people.
Yeah.
Or
Improvisers.
they become wonderful.
Right.
in the
Or they
course of
become
it.
wonderful. They're fun to talk to. They're very loose.
Right.
They're able to connect with people. Very free flowing. So it's just it's a great community of people.
Tell us how you got involved.
I was on stage first when I was 3, tap dancing, and since then
I've seen the pictures on Facebook.
Yes. Since then, no one can rip me off stage.
Right.
No, I've been stuck there forever. In 8th grade, I did the show Cinderfella.
Did you play the lead?
Yeah, it was Cinderfella. And
Can we bring that back?
Yeah.
restage it.
Only if it involves the leotard.
Oh yeah. And then I did theater in high school at an all-boys Catholic school, and then I was like, I want to be an actor. I love acting.
What did your parents say? Because I said the same thing to my parents, and I didn't get a positive response. What did your parents say?
My mom recently asked me, why didn't I become a surgeon? And I said, first of all, I have a small hand tremor, and second of all, you would have to go back and redo everything you ever did in your entire life for me to want to do that. So I realized in college I was an acting major, and I could not memorize anything, and I was driving everyone crazy. So they were like, why don't you be a theater director? And I was like, all right, we'll do that. But I still liked being on stage and performing. So there's this troupe, Gag Reflex, at Wesleyan University that I went to, and it was so much fun that you get to perform without worrying about it, without having to say the same thing over and over. Like with a play, you got to say the same words over and over.
Right.
It's boring.
So boring. So I did that, and then I moved to DC, and then I had a horrible case of just horrible bipolar disorder. So for 2 years, I just traveled between my apartment and work, just in this elliptical kind of place for 2 years. And I saw an ad from the Washington Improv Theater that they were having classes. So I said to myself, improv would be a really good way to get back into learning how to communicate with people, learning to understand my emotions, learning to just connect in a real visceral level. And it really worked. It really helped me pull through that mental disorder.
Yeah, people have said the same thing to me. I once, when I first started teaching about 10 years ago, there was a woman who kept taking my class over and over and over.
That wasn't me.
No, it wasn't Sabahat. And
not all women are me, I guess.
I'd see her name on the roster like 3 times in a row. But the 4th time, I said to her, I said, Charlotte, it's not going to change. It's not going to change. And she looks at me and she goes, Shawn, it's cheaper than therapy. Yeah, it is. I mean, the sort of getting together once a week for 2 hours and laughing with a bunch of other people. So,
I do have to say though that it can also be very hard because you can get into improv ruts. So I've
absolutely.
Since I've started, I've gone off and on improv, but not necessarily because I also was never really a performer, except for my brief stint in Our Town in high school as the mother of an entirely blonde family.
Typecasting again.
The director, I think, was just this amazing guy who was stuck in a small town in Pennsylvania. He's like, I'm going to put the South Asian woman as the mother. How hilarious is that for me? So you kind of are torn. After I took all the classes at DC Improv, I was like, well, I guess I'm done.
Right.
And sort of went back to it a couple years later. And performing is hard. It is great when you get laughs and when you meet incredible people.
Sure.
But then you also feel like if you're not doing something well, or if you feel rejected, or you feel like you're seeking approval that you're not necessarily getting. So it can also be when
what you talked about, seeking approval. Because I mean, we get up here because it's kind of a drug. We make a choice, or it's kind of funny, or make a character choice of some sort, start talking in a crazy voice, and the audience goes, whoa, and you go, oh, hey, there's this kind of thing. Right. And then that turns into the entire goal. It becomes, it's as in addiction. You go, come on, feed the drug.
Hey, did you see the show? Did
you
like me now? Do you like me now?
Do you like that funny thing I did? Was that good?
Funny.
Was that funny? But yeah, and of course, as we all know, that's the wrong reason to get up there and do it. You get up there and do it to because I've been there myself. I know exactly what you're.
Why did you get up there to do it?
I had a strange journey to improv. I like Topher, I was involved in acting in high school and was in all the plays and had a bunch of fun. And when I sort of talked to my parents about maybe this is the next step, they were working class parents from Southern Indiana, not about that. You go work in a factory like your dad did, or you go make an honest living, whatever that looked like.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So my answer was to get the heck out of there by joining the military. So I joined the military. Long story short, I got out of the military and my ex-wife stayed in. And she ended up stationed in Utah, and the sort of creative bug, it never leaves you, right?
No.
So you have that sort of impulse to say, "Dig me, I'm on stage."
Yeah.
It never leaves, and so I thought, well, I'll get involved in local community theater. So I started taking classes with a guy by the name of Kent Bateman, who was the father of Justine and Jason Bateman. When I was living in
way.
yeah.
Childhood heroes of mine.
I was living just north of Salt Lake City. He was in Park City. So once a weekend, I would go up to Park City to take classes with Kent Bateman.
Okay.
And he first introduced me to this. It's funny because I lived in Indiana, and we were close to Chicago, which, as we all know, is the mecca of improv. We all turn at 4 p.m. Chicago on our prayer mats and say, our prayer. But it
Actually, 7 times a day. Not just
sorry about that. I need to bone up on my religious.
On your improv religion.
On my improv religion, right? But I never made the connection that a big huge fan of SNL. I was my formative years were watching those first few seasons, but I never connected that the path to get on SNL went through Chicago, went through this thing called improv. It never connected. I just never connected it. So Kent Bateman was the first one to expose me to improv comedy. And his idea of improv was to take the characters we were working on for scene study, and pull them out of their context, put them on stage and say, okay, now you guys are like Stanley Kowalski from Streetcar, you're with Hamlet and you're at a bus stop. Let's see what happens. And all the scenes that I ever saw or did, mine in particular, abysmal failures. Just awful. Okay. And I thought I don't know what this thing improv is.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. I've had enough, And so fast forward about 6 months after that, I moved to Hawaii, So about 6 months after that, I'm watching television late at night, and I have no idea. You've heard me tell this story. I have no idea who this troupe was. It was like A&E, 1 o'clock in the morning, Sunday night. It's like they were trying to fill program. Let's throw this stuff up there. I turn on the TV and I'm in the middle of the program. I see this troupe. No idea where they're from. It wasn't Whose Line Is It Anyway. It was a troupe doing in a black box theater doing short form improv, and my head exploded. Just all over the place. I knew I was born to do that, and so I swore that the next opportunity that I found would do it. Fast forward, moved to Hawaii, got cast in this one-off show and I got this crash course in improv. At the end of the one-off show, they basically said, "Hey, you're pretty good. Join the troupe," and I've been involved ever since. Yeah. So my formal improv training was 4 weeks.
Wow.
4 weeks of formal improv training. That's all with workshops here.
I've never taken an improv class.
You haven't either?
You are.
No, I just found an improv school. I do not know. In DC, when was the first class you taught? What year?
It was 10 years ago in May. It was so it's
2003?
2003.
2003?
Yeah, and then like Washington Improv Theater was like ramping up at just about the same time.
Yeah.
You guys had just rebooted Washington.
In 2000, I started the Washington Improv Theater training program.
Right. Okay.
And there were 2 classes a year, and now there are over 100 classes a year because you and I are evangelizers.
Exactly, proselytizers.
Proselytizers of this specific form of like freeing yourself.
Right.
So at Washington Improv Theater, there's now thousands and thousands
Absolutely.
of people,
Right.
1,500 plus people do it every year. So they're all over the place.
Yeah.
And we have 40 teachers, and we do, so it's a
Right.
huge program, and you have a similar number of students
But one teacher.
with one
The
teacher.
master.
No, I mean, guys, I certainly don't have that as many as Washington Improv Theater does. I do know that I'm busy. I'm teaching
Yeah.
sometimes 5 times a week,
Wow.
on top of a demanding day job.
Right.
But again, I mean, that goes to I love it. I mean,
Yeah.
if I hated teaching, and again, I'm sure we've all experienced this, where we come up against a person whose improvisational choices we respect, who's a great improviser, but you get in front of his or her class, and you go,
Oh, right. That is really the best
he or
teacher.
she isn't really into teaching. It's like this thing that he or she does. I can say honestly that I love teaching, and I once read an interview with a guy named Randall Jarrell, who's a poet. You know, remember poet, right? And who taught poetry at Vanderbilt University for years and years and years. And he once said, "I love teaching poetry so much that I would pay to do it. I would pay to go teach a class in poetry. I love them." And I feel the same way.
But that's
Don't get any ideas, DC Improv.
But that's what a lot of
but, yeah.
improvisers are basically doing.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
it's basically, 1,500 people or whatever. It's for the most part, except for certain people that have acting training, are able to make a living off of it.
Right.
It's a group of amateurs
Right.
that are paying to perform.
Right. Yeah.
And but I think that the way it sort of sucks you in, even though there's not really a lot of potential for
Right. Yeah.
for
If you're getting involved in
recompense.
improv for the money, you're not going to cash the checks. It's not.
Yeah.
There's a
Move
New
to an
Yorker
island.
cartoon. A New Yorker cartoon of 2 mimes in Central Park, and one of them says to the other, "The real money's in improv."
But I think the way you do it is because it's like an art form that blends the line between the audience and the performer.
Right.
Right.
It's
Right.
like so interactive because without a decent audience, it's not necessarily a great show.
Right.
And without great performers, it's not. You don't really feel connected as an audience.
Right. Yeah.
Plus, has that
And-
sense of community. I know a lot of stand-up comedians, and it's the total opposite.
Yeah.
Stand-up comedians are a bunch of lone wolves, and
Right.
they
Right.
don't understand.
Yeah,
half
they-
these
yeah,
guys
they
make me
don't like each
uncomfortable.
other.
Yeah.
They make
yeah.
each other uncomfortable. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what keeps me
Not all.
involved in it too. Like the sense of community, like
Mm-hmm.
being around. Because I feel like I'm playing on stage with my friends, for my friends, and
Right.
kind of hanging out.
I think I like to sort of to steer the conversation into a topic that I'm sort of wondering about, and maybe you guys have insight on this. So we all know that the local improv community is more highly energized and thriving than it ever has been. There's just you can't, as I tell my classes, you can't spit in this city without hitting an improviser. It's just impossible, right? And yet, I don't think that we get the attention, not necessarily we deserve, but that would be warranted, especially considering how improv, the larger artistic and performative culture, has been taken over by improv.
Okay.
Amy Poehler, Will Ferrell, Tina Fey, Stephen Colbert, these people didn't come up through Circle in the Square Theater. They didn't come up through the Playhouse, the Pasadena Playhouse.
Right.
They came up through improv. They came up through Chicago. They came up through New York. They came up through. They're trained almost exclusively in improv. So it's funny how at the top of the comedy food chain are all improvisational actors, right? And yet the local media doesn't really pay a lot of attention to that's like the City Paper, Washington City Paper, reviewing only U2 concerts and ignoring the local bands, which of course Washington City Paper prides itself in. So I guess my question is, why do you think it is that people haven't made the connection that what all of us do is the same thing that Will Ferrell, Amy Poehler ad nauseum, name Seth Rogen, Paul Rudd, people who are trained in improv. Why is that? Why aren't those talking points being communicated?
Can I make one comment about
Sure,
that?
sure.
It's not necessarily an answer, but I went to New York recently with one of my improv troupes, and of course, a lot of people know about Topher or
Right.
Shawn Michaels,
Right,
and this guy came up to me afterwards, and he was like, "Oh, you guys do it." He's like, "So you guys do improv in DC?" Kind of like, "Oh, I'm surprised."
Right,
He's like,
right.
"I'm from Maryland. I grew
Right.
up there." And I was like, "Yeah, there's a a lot of us,
Yeah.
like a lot of us, and it's a thriving
An
scene.
army, and we're marching on.
But I think so. A lot of people are surprised, and that's probably because it doesn't get as much press as New York
Exactly.
or Boston
Right.
or Chicago.
Right.
I think part of that reason for that is there's no fixed space
Yeah.
for it, so
Right.
there's no actual theater where Express could say, hey, like Washington Express could just like cover it every week.
Right.
I think there's dual things going on there.
Okay.
The first is the theater reviewer for the Washington Press, one of them, who she'll go by the name Celia Wren.
Is that her real name?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And there's another guy too, Peter Marks.
yeah. But so Celia Wren came to see our show, and the format of the show is you fill out cards.
Put that
Yeah.
in context. It was the
Which show?
seasonal disorder.
It's our Christmas show.
Seasonal
A Christmas
disorder
show.
Right.
And we each, the people in the show, get a card, do a monologue based on that card, and become that character for about an hour and 15 minutes, and play out like a comedy drama of the life of that family.
Who are all gathering for the holidays at a house,
Right.
So in essence, the audience is assigning the character to the improvisational
yeah.
actors right at the top. It's a great format. It's a fun show too.
So on it was, what is your pet peeve was one of the questions you could fill out.
Right.
And one of them was audience participation theater. And the name at the top was Celia.
Oh my.
So we're naming
So,
names here.
Yeah. I was like, all right, well, I'm glad you came in with a...
Yeah.
Positive mind.
Yeah.
Well, and again, it makes you wonder. That's like saying, "Hey, you critic who hates heavy metal,
Yeah.
why don't you go review, Limp Bizkit?"
Right.
Really?
So basically,
Yeah.
we need to get someone hired
Right.
in one of the papers who is an improviser.
The second-
Or
Or
we'll
at least
kidnap
friendly
one,
to
kidnap one of the
improvisational.
journalists
Right.
and make them take a
make
class.
them take an improv class. And yeah.
The second part of it, in LA, there's the Groundlings. In
Right.
Chicago, there's Second City.
And IO.
Annoyance. And in New York, there is the Upright Citizens Brigade and Magnet and
Pitt.
People's
And
Pitt, People's
Pitt,
Improv
right.
Theater. And the people at all of those areas are trying to make their improv their vocation. Like that's their job. They want to do this format and go
Right.
somewhere
They sort of
else.
discovered that the stepping stone to writing for this Colbert Report or writing for a Daily Show is goes through these venues, right? Right.
And here it's an avocation for most people.
Right.
And the people,
You don't make a living at this?
right? Well, a little. And so people like that I have taught have gone on to write for the Daily Show, have gone on to write for SNL, but they leave here.
Right.
They come and get their education here, and they move to New York. Which is what people do.
You hit a glass ceiling.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know what the scene is like in other places, but you mentioned that they get friendly press in places like Boston, where I would think it would be an avocation there.
Sure.
So it sounds like, I was thinking that maybe the reason that it doesn't get written about here was sort of the same reason why, electronic dance music doesn't always get press,
Right.
which is because critics lack the vocabulary to write about it.
I think it's a great way of putting it. Critics lack the vocabulary. They certainly don't understand what they're saying. Right?
And it also falls in a gray area between comedy
Right.
and theater.
Yeah.
And so nobody knows
exactly what to do with it.
nobody knows what to do with it, where
Right.
to list it, who
Right.
would review it, how they would, as you said, talk about
But
it.
it's not such a. I mean, not to disagree with all of you, but it's not.
Which is what you're doing.
I feel like it's not such a mystery anymore, or like
I agree.
When I first started, I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, like I don't know what this is, and
Right.
it seems it's entertaining and it's fun, but like what do you do with it? How do you categorize it?
Right.
But there's movies that are almost wholly
Exactly.
improvised now,
Right.
so
I mean, series.
it's become
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly. It's become so like almost mainstream
Right.
that it's.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I've been teaching for 10 years, and in those 10 years, my talking points about what I do have shifted, dramatically. First, it was, no, it's not stand-up. It's kind of just it's comedy made up on the spot. And then after Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's like, that thing they do on Whose Line Is It? Whose Line Is It Anyway? I teach people to do that. And now it's that thing that Will Ferrell, Amy Poehler, Tina Fey. You're right. It's improv is nearly finished with its long march through the media.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, like, when's local media going to go, oh, wait a minute. And my theory is that it's going to take someone like Rory Scovel or Seton Smith to sort of make it on again, local comedians who have gone on improvisation, but primarily stand-up comedians, but who went both ways. And gone on to other things, are now being cast on series in network-produced series. It's going to take someone like that, some breakout star, for someone at the style section of the Post or someone at the City Paper to go, wait a minute, that name sounds familiar. Oh yeah, 6 years ago he was performing stand-up here. 6 years ago he was on Wit's main stage. 6 years ago he was here, doing this.
Right.
And I'm just wondering when someone's going to connect the dots and say, oh God, not only was that that scene there 6 years ago, it's still here, it's still thriving, it's still energized. There are people passionate about it. There are people doing it really, really well, despite all the logistical challenges that it faces.
You want to hear something awesome?
Yes.
No, I don't.
Yes. What is
Yes, I
awesome is that, so you have been pushing and teaching improv for a decade.
A decade.
If I start it, so for me, 13 years.
Sure.
And pushing that forward, there is now a head of steam of thousands of people
Exactly.
who want to do this.
Right.
And I think that what we started, you two have come in and kind of concretized a lot of that, and been able to bring it together. So, but what are you doing with that community? I feel like you have we maybe more know about the students, and
Right.
the players.
Yeah. What are the next steps?
Yeah, what are the next steps?
Well, I think Jeff and I are working on organizing an improv festival that, because the same thing, like what happened in New York, like people are like, oh, there's a scene in DC, and it's like, yes. And we went to Boston to perform too, and they are familiar with ensembles from here, but not so familiar with the scene. So we're hoping that we'll be bringing improvisers from all over the country, maybe all over the world.
Right.
Meaning Canada. It's a DC,
cool.
and sort of like exposing them to our scene and
Right.
saying, hey, like look at us, like this is what we have going on here. So that'll happen in September of this year. And it's been, since we brainstormed it, it's been insane how much support we've gotten.
Right.
Like people, not only improvisers, but people that are like, we support improv. I don't do improv, but I support improvisers and I want to support you.
Right.
So that's incredible. And
I've also been involved with that. I'm also always looking at, until we have a central theater for improv, always trying to look at new spaces that we can perform.
Right.
So we've staged a couple of shows at Comet Ping Pong up in the upper Northwest. Basically, the cool thing about improvisers is, they're all they want to do is perform. So it's just
And there's a
They're
DIY
flexible.
ethos, right?
Right.
Do it yourself.
Yeah.
We are that community.
right. And as a person who's always like punk rock and that type of music, I really love that part about the scene.
Right.
So like I'm always trying to help look for new venues, trying to bring new voices, give people their first stage time. I'd love to be able to someday say that I gave like so and so insert famous comedian here their
Jeff
first show.
Hughes.
Yeah.
But I think the ultimate goal to really concretize it would be to have an established space where people could go to see improv every night of the
Right.
week.
Yeah.
And
So
sort
if
of
nothing
being
else
here and
comes out of this conversation, hopefully someone watching this has a theater or a restaurant.
Or an unlimited supply of cash.
It doesn't.
Or all of the above.
But it only takes one stake in the ground,
Right.
and for everyone to rally around it. And there's a huge community.